5:11 дома, да? Ну, вони нормально.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us today. My name is Olha Tamanova, and I'm happy to see you here in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. Today we invited you for a very interesting event. It's been 9 years of the war, and today is day 392 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor. And now we will be talking specifically about the support of our military. We invited you for the presentation of the legal guide for the servicemen, the guide which is represented by an online platform where our servicemen who were injured during battles may find the answers to their questions. Our guests today are Masi Nayyem, co-founder of Human Rights Center for Military called Principle. Also joining us today are Liubov, Halan, co-founder and the chair of Human Rights Center for the Military called Principle, and Mariia Kravchenko, the coordinator of the Military Medical Commission volunteer movement in Kyiv. Good afternoon, dear friends. If somebody is unaware of the organization called Principle, a couple of words about this organization. It was founded this year, and its activity is aimed specifically at legal aid, legal support of our military. So, Masi, please, let's talk about this guide. How is it important, how is it useful, and how our military may make use of it? Well, I will probably start with my own story. When you wake up in a hospital after the injury, the last thing you want to think about is the paperwork. But if you haven't thought of them before, as a consequence, you may have legal proceedings opened in your relation, or you may not be allowed to go on vacation, or you will get an additional PTSD when you face the state, when you try to acquire that paperwork. In my case, I was out of the hospital, and as long as I was staying there, within 2.5 months, almost 3 months, I didn't have a single place, a single spot where to gather my paperwork. My friends are real good friends. They did it for me. I didn't find it. As a serviceman, even as a lawyer, you have to dig deep. You have to know that there is a legal company, but to use those types of paperwork, it's difficult for those who are not lawyers, for those military who are just a regular military. So in my case, I went for a certificate to go on vacation. How it happens in Kyiv is I went to my military unit. I took the application for the hospital at 16 Hospitalna Street. The certificate is only been issued there from 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I came there at 2 o'clock. I was 72nd in the queue. I went on the next day at 11 o'clock. And then I got that paperwork, and I went back to my military unit, so where I could submit a report so I could go on vacation. That was surprising for me in the same way that it's surprising for a lot of people here in the studio, because we write a lot of posts on the social networks like everybody thanks our military. So our military are injured here in the hospital. Why should they go walk around with this piece of paper? So it's the paper from the military medical committee. Why is it military? Because the military trusts them. They don't trust the regular doctors, but if you trust them, so agree, coordinate it between you two. Why should the servicemen walk around with those papers in their hands? So this is why we wanted to initiate this project, so those changes facilitated for the military. We made this legal guide. It's very convenient. Why am I saying it's convenient? Because I'm still getting PTSD when I have to face the state, but still I keep moving forward because I have no other choice than that. But now Ms. Liubov Halan, with whom we co-founded this civil organization, will tell us in detail how this guide is built and what is it for, and you will see the whole logic behind that. The main thing we wanted to achieve is to get clarity for the military so that they don't become hysteric when someone explains to them where to go and which paperwork they should get. They have to write it down. They are the military, they were injured, they gave everything to their country already. They don't have to take care about the paperwork really. So Ms. Liubov, let's talk about the information that is contained in this guide. Well, this information, the work with it was not easy, even for the military who keep working with the military since 2014. This legal framework has some regional peculiarities, and to have some legal algorithm which is clear and transparent for them, which will take away excessive questions and provide more answers, that was a challenging task for us. I want to thank, first of all, to Hot Bureau and Spheric Agency, our partners, who agreed to develop this in that design easy for us, which would allow to find that information easily. You see, even the fonts are familiar to most of the Ukrainians. Our guide consists of 5 phases. It's the consequence of our analysis, is the result of our analysis. Before launching this guide, we found out what are the phases that are most painful for our military. We had to cover the most issues. The first of all is evacuation, then it's treatment and sorting out of the circumstances of injury, the military medical committee. In some cases it's treatment abroad, and in some cases where the injury resulted in disability, it's the disability issue. So when we started working with the families of the injured military, we've realized that unfortunately there were cases that among our colleagues, among the lawyers, there is abuse of such need. So sometimes even the easiest report may cost several thousand hryvnia in the market, but it's a very simple document which can be downloaded or drawn up by the military themselves. Yeah, you can show it here. The navigator, the guide, it has pre-uploaded documents there. You can download them in the upper right corner. There is the list of documents. In the doc format, you can download them and just to add your details. As an organization, we cannot stand behind the back of each and every military while contacting the government. That's impossible. Unfortunately, the full-scale invasion not only increased the number of the participants of the military operations, but according to the official forecast, we're talking about at least 1.5 million people who have battle experience, and obviously there will be a certain ratio of the injured. And as a civil organization, unfortunately, we cannot provide everybody with consultancy support, but we may provide them with the instruments that they may make use of, and we hope that it will become of use to them. There is a huge work behind that, and in this subject, unfortunately, we cannot open the law or some other regulation and just to rewrite word for word what's written there and tell the military, here you go, use it. It's not so, because in practice, for example, conscription office, the territorial enlistment center, they cannot give you the application for the military committee. So the guide is built in a way to have reference to the regulation, but there are comments from our lawyers how it really works in practice. And we draw the attention of the military where there are certain risks for their security in terms of criminal liability, as Masi mentioned. If you come back to your military unit in a non-timely manner, you may be announced a deserter or something like that. So we collect the feedback. It's interesting to get your comments about your experience, because there are things that really are difficult to find out that they should be added to the guide. For example, this Form 100, the card which is filled after the evacuation of a military, it's been lost in frequent cases. Many military just don't have it. And then it turned out that when you pass the military medical committee, they demand to have it, but it's not something that is regulated by any legislative act. So there is no such legal requirement towards the military. We don't know where this requirement came from. So please send your comments. We will work through them with our lawyers, and it's important that we have this opportunity to discuss it to a certain extent, to find out the important information from both our colleagues who work with the government, who work with the interagency working group. And to some extent, this guide is a buffer through which we can communicate the problems to them. So it's a plan for amendment of our legislation further on. So I invite everybody to use it, and we appreciate the input of every military who get familiarized with this guide. In the military units, usually there are people who are responsible for the injured. So please share it, communicate it to those injured. Usually those people, they don't know how to advise to the military what to do, but the military unit should be the place where the military find out what are the steps to be taken. And it would be good for them to get familiarized with that guide, with this algorithm, and to manage the injured and their families in this process. So this unclarity, in transparency, non-understanding of what's going to happen to you next, that's a very painful story. I will give you just one example with which I started work with this organization. There were no problems with the paperwork itself, but a serviceman who lost both of his legs during a battle, he lives with his parents in a rural area, and because of the mistake of a person who works with the military unit, who did not sort out the situation, he told that person that your injury is not related to the defense of your homeland, you will not get paid, you will not get any pension. That message sent them really to hell for 3 months. They were hysteric that he would not be treated, he would not get a prosthesis. His parents were writing the letters to his commander to sort it out, but in fact everything was normal. The investigation was completed, the certificates were all submitted, but there was a miscommunication and lack of understanding of people who were supposed to be responsible for him. There was lack of understanding with them, and it's been 3 months of his life of a person who was already injured that turned out to be a personal hell for them. So with this guide, we want to put out this personal hell for them where we can, and I want to announce that this legal guide will develop. It will cover more topics for the injured, it will have interface for the veterans, for the servicemen, and for an important target group, the families of the servicemen whom we should support. Well, I apologize. Before I pass the microphone to Mariia, I would like to show our posters on the screen. It's important that we print the first series of posters with the QR codes that we want to post in all the medical institutions where our relevant audience is, where the volunteers work who take care of the service issues for the military medical commissions. Those posters may be downloaded from our website, and we appreciate the work of the people in the regions, the servicemen who want to spread it, who want to get involved in spreading the information about legal guide, including physically. So those posters may be downloaded from your website. Yes, correct. Fine. Yeah, I'm happy to know that principle emerged. And these posters exist because when we got involved as a volunteers to what's going on in the hospitals, the situation started in Lviv. Actually, when we drew attention of the community that in Lviv there is certain problem in the queues. The military don't get their basic needs covered. They cannot make a copy of their paperwork there on spot, which is banal. You just need to put a copier machine there so they can copy their documents without running nobody knows where, specifically when you don't know the place, when you're not familiar with that place. So the volunteers started covering those basic needs like coolers with water, copying machines, so the military who are on staying in queues, it's like immense number of hours that you spend in the hospitals, so that they feel more comfortable in the conditions that exist for the time being. Thank you. I think there is a layer of problems that exist and they keep moving only thanks to the fact that such people who are not indifferent, that they exist, who take care of these issues. Ms. Liubov, you mentioned that the guide will be expanded. We understand that there is a question right away. For example, for the families who lost their closed ones, I mean those warriors who perished, they face a huge and immense number of bureaucratic procedures, and this guide could be a very powerful support for them, a supporting instrument, because nobody is prepared to lose a close one. No one is getting prepared to have a close one injured, but we understand that at certain moment this is something that may be of help to them. So when can we expect to see some expansion of this guide? I just want to say that when we talk about the families, it's a very important target audience along all the routes, since the enlistment of a person until the very moment that unfortunately such person either gets an injury or dies, it becomes a personal pain of the family. So those people are very important. Using my opportunity, I want to take my hat off in front of all the people who take care about their injured close ones, the women, the wives, because they are the guardian angels. Based on the stories we know, they fight for those, for their husbands, for those who were injured, because sometimes those people, they stop fighting for themselves, and here are the wives who start fighting for them. They try to achieve the justice, the fairness, and I would like first of all for them to get those free guides, the basic documents that they may use, and thus to understand that they're not alone in this fight. So the situation that people have to fight, even the fact that we use those words, fighting for justice, that's an inadequate situation. The fact that we had to create a working group consisting of lawyers to create this guide, this is not how the legal framework should work. The practice should not go misaligned with what's written in the legislation. So except expanding the guide, we will try to do some systemic changes that would facilitate this way for different categories of people. The servicemen, again, with a specific accent on the injured, the veterans, the families of the servicemen, the families of the missing in action, prisoners of war, and those who unfortunately lost their families. As to the civil society and the veteran community and the servicemen, it's important to understand that the demand was critical in this situation. In fact, full-scale invasion, it just started demonstrating this problem. It's not new. It keeps existing for a long time. It's just that now the number of those who face this problem is bigger, and we appreciate the input of those servicemen who started bringing up this topic in the social media. So many people asked, why are you the ones who are doing this? There is no conspiracy. When they say why it started happening this time, there was no peak point. It just coincided. So it's just that the military sometimes are afraid of some sanctions because they come back to their military units. So we have to create this legal support for them. This is what differs us from Russia. For us, the injured, the servicemen, is a part of our civil duty. It's prestige. It's a prestige of military duty of Ukraine, and how we do it now, it lays fundamentals for the future for a very large category of people. Masi, I wanted to ask you about the Civil Rights Center, the Human Rights Center that you decided to found. How it works now, with what do people come to you with? What are the most typical cases? Well, look, there are many cases people are coming to us with, but we decided not to provide primary consultations and to guide the military, because for that we need to create an extensive company consisting of 100 or 200 lawyers who might be able to solve 10% of the issues. More effective would be to make systemic changes in the state, which would make sure that the military don't have such type of problems. So this is the type of advocacy we're doing. When we explain to the government what are the actual problems, and when we actualize them, and during the first meeting, when we came to Mr. Fedorov, and Mr. Fedorov said, let's create a working group. This working group was attended by Deputy Commander of Medical Forces, and he said, like, everything works fine. But if you want to change something, change it later, after the war. And we've explained it, that no one needs them. No one needs us after the war. We are needed now, unfortunately. So it's time to make changes now. So our story is to make these systemic changes. We are being addressed frequently with regard to the behavior of the commanders towards their subjects. They tear their reports, for example. They act aggressive. So there is a large number of lawyers in Ukraine. If all the lawyers turn military, we would have had the biggest army in the world. So but there are no lawyers who specialize in military law, because it was never profitable before the full-scale invasion, right? So we decided to do this for free. All the services provided by principal civil organization, they are free. And we decided to get specialized in this area so that the army of lawyers get armed with those instruments that they were studying in their institutes and universities, that they use those instruments to protect the military now. And with our platform, we want to prove that we want to have military understand they have rights. They don't have to be afraid. They're not in Russia. They have a right to defend themselves. There are lawyers for this. But if the lawyers lack competence in military law, here is the first product that we provide you with. The future iterations of our services will probably enable the military either to protect themselves by themselves or at less cost using the support of lawyers. So for us it's important that the military, for example our society, we let us violate our rights just before we found out that we have them. You remember we were beaten by the police just until the very moment that we realized it's illegal. So we want to give the military these fishing sticks so they understand that they have rights, they can protect themselves, they can get themselves protected against the illogical procedures. Well, you with Minister Fedorov, you announced the process of digitalization of Military Medical Committee. We know that it's a painful topic for our military. So what's going on in that area? Well, that's a complicated process, but we are happy to have become the initiator of this story. Even the president brought up this matter during the meeting. He said, who thinks it's necessary? But the group already is working for more than 2 months. They found out what are the problems, they made analysis, they've considered certain issues, they systematized them, and they are currently working on them. It has certain dynamics, it's moving. the military will get the process facilitated in a month or probably two, but the quick changes are only possible in our state. Just only Mr. Saakashvili will be let out of the prison, but before that there will be no easy and quick changes, because anything we break now, as a consequence, it should be replaced with something that could have worked. Us as a civil organization, we take part in this committee, in this working group. We observe that since the beginning, since the idea to its implementation, this momentum is not being lost. This is what we make sure of, because many people who provide the services of the Military Medical Committee, they see the military as the problem. For us, it's somebody whom we admire, whom we respect. Their people are traumatized by the problems brought up by the military constantly, on and on. So to change it, there should be a demand on part of the society. We as the society, we have to understand. We were passing 16 Hospitalna Street, Lesia Ukrainka Boulevard. There are dozens of cars. Before I got injured, I never walked in there. There were some people wearing uniforms, somebody drinking coffee. We were all writing posts, like we were thanking the armed forces of Ukraine in a posts in social media, and it never changed. So I think that the changes which are happening now, they are not as quick as we would like to, but the nature of how the government works with it, it gives us hope, and for us, we want to expedite the process, we want to support them, to give our military this opportunity. This is how we help our government, our state. Dear colleagues, if we have any questions on the floor, please introduce yourself, get engaged in our conversation. Other questions or comments? Good afternoon. Andrei Kucher, the 72 Airborne Brigade, civil organization, strong together. Among your activities, there is also advocacy. Mr. Nayyem started talking that there are some figures, but we remember that there are 4 structures which cooperate with military medical commissions and Ministry of Health, Ministry of Veteran Affairs, and Ministry of Defense too. So my question is, have you been engaged in a discussion with them? Because I have kind of a negative experience of contact with those organizations, diplomatically said. So have you heard any tips about some successful international experience on NATO standards in this regard? So another question is, for example, my brothers in arms, they wait for the military medical committee for like 4 months. I think you know about this situation, it's not new to you, and my guys are asking me all the time that there is some demotivation. So while those 4 government agencies, while they're thinking, they're looking for activists, for leaders such as you, for example, so within that period people just get demotivated and they don't get properly treated. So in this aspect, what's your forecast? Those my brothers in arms who wait for 4 months, when would they be able to pass this medical committee? Within 1 month. Okay, my question, my request to you, we will exchange contacts. Let's write a letter jointly. I will hand it to Ms. Bezugla, to Ms. Hanna Mahler. She is responsible for this area of work in the Ministry of Defense. So we will bring up this issue with them, so it's actual for them, because we started working with those medical military committees not because it's the issue of the national security, because the injured ones are the military with an experience. As soon as they are treated, they come back to war. For example, I want to come back to war, and in my case it doesn't happen as quickly as I would like to. So demotivation is just something that you should knock on the head of somebody who is responsible for that. So the problem is only because we are tired. It was a huge problem. I think that the changes will come in about 3 months, when they will be able to pass those functions to the civil hospitals. And we should unite all the digital systems so that they could provide the services to the military, and the tension will subside because those services will be able to be provided by other healthcare facilities, because there are more civil healthcare facilities than military ones. And this is when the guys are going to wait less for this. So this is why I would like to exchange contacts with you. Will take your letter, and I promise that within a week Miss Mariana will hold that letter in her hands and we'll see her reaction, because Miss Mariana wanted to solve the problems of the military. We'll see how she makes it. And another my question, I wanted to mention about the standards, the working group that works with the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Veteran Affairs, and the Ministry of Health. They're the stakeholders, and obviously the command of the medical forces, which is a separate structure. We don't mix them. There are many decisions taken by them. The level of the colleagues who are involved in the process of making decisions, we are satisfied with them. They are good specialists, and it depends how they will work together in synergy, because many processes depend on different agencies and different organizations. Many things that we are talking about, they don't start with the military medical committee, they start with the military unit, and a lot of decisions are taken there. Or they may be emergent in the enlistment center. So a lot of magic will happen when people who are responsible for the decision making in their sector, when they will be ready to do that. So we call everybody and we insist that it should be made, it should be done. Working there, we understand who is responsible for those decisions, and on our level we will try to influence on them, so the general idea doesn't stop. There will be no big changes without this cooperation. There will be no changes without cooperation with the parliament, because sooner or later we will come to the change of the legislation which regulated all, and this is where the adequate perception will be needed for those changes to take place. As to the changes happening now, we don't call it reforms, because there are quick changes and long-term changes that will take place in a year or longer that require more inclusion. However, it's still not a reform, because the standards, how you identify ability or disability on certain phases when a person gets injured, or on the phase of enlistment, so those are the things that should be rethought in order not to get too deep in details. Just to find out how this standard works, we open the order 402 and we don't understand anything from there, and when we get deeper into the addendums to it, we understand that the criteria for identification of either eligibility or non-eligibility, they are quite peculiar. They're not standardized, and they grow from Soviet Union. It's no secret to anybody. So for us to catch up with the NATO standard, which are the best practices of our colleagues from different countries, everything should be rethought. On the level of organization, we started this analysis so we understand how it can be used here, because we cannot just copy paste it, because it will be broken here on this phase of implementation. But we want to give recommendations to a government how it can be worked over. You know about different stories from this opera, who is eligible for what positions, and why the veterans with disability cannot have some positions in the armed forces as instructors, for example, or when their disability is not an obstacle for fulfilling their tasks. So sometimes the government positions this story as the desert, and it's like everybody who is injured, they want to just flee home, but there is a large fraction of the military who would like to undergo the military medical commission after the injury and then be recommended for the positions with the army where they can use their expertise. Unfortunately, now there's a lot of non-logical things in that. Different stories like who is responsible for what and who may do what. In practice, in military units, it looks yet even completely different, so we have to rethink it, because what's on the agenda for us, what is priority for us, is the issue of the servicemen who are disabled but they cannot retire from military service. We have to find out what to do with them, and the temporary disability for those who are currently in the military units but they are not being let to go home. So we have to change approach to this within the framework that exists for the time being. You know, I hope that military medical committees will not hear us, but I want to show to the society. I received a document that I'm completely I will receive the document that I'm completely eligible for military service. So this is gonna be yet another proof that the military medical committee just doesn't work. You may pay money so that they certify you as eligible or non-eligible. I won't pay any money. I just know that I will get this document because I talked with the command about that. I just want to go back to war. I'm sure I will receive the certificate that I'm eligible, and it will be the best indicator of how the military medical commission works. So we have to understand as a society that those who bribe to be certified as non-eligible will never tell you publicly about this. And we don't know what is the statistics behind that, but I know personally the statistics about those guys who want to come back to war. And we keep knocking on the doors, we keep finding ways, and they get the certificate that they're eligible, like I don't have an eye, but I will be eligible. Well, let's see. Really, it's a very sad story because we understand that there are problems and they should be solved. So maybe this is how we may push to some cardinal changes in the civil society and helping the government and all the representatives of the government how to we understand that there are a lot of challenges with the government. We have to keep control over this. This is our task, including the journalists. Steve, you're having a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you for being out. Steve Kleiman, Pacific Rex. 2 questions. I heard Minister Fedorov, so I assume that's the Ministry of Digital Transformation. On that, could you talk a little bit about their involvement and who do you manage the infrastructure? Do you manage your own system, or do they manage it for you? And second question, I'm wondering, do you anticipate there being an English language version for foreigners in groups like the, and forgive me if I missed it, for like the International Legion? Thank you.
I will speak in Ukrainian, I'm sorry. So as to the Ministry of Digitalization, it started with the initiative by Mikhailo Fedorov, but again, the main actors of changes are going to be the ministries which are responsible for the work in that area: the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Veteran Affairs, and Ministry of Defense, and the command of the medical forces, which regulates this system. As to the information part of all this story, the military medical committees exist in civil healthcare facilities and in military healthcare facilities too. In the civil healthcare facilities, there was a reform, fortunately, and there are medical information systems, the infrastructure which allows to pass a part of the processes to get them automatized, so to say. But talking about the military hospitals, there is no medical information system implemented there. there is no place to send that document. So the important players in this field are the territorial enlistment centers and the military units. Our servicemen keeps traveling between those institutions or those organizations, carrying papers from one place to another. And for us, what's important to do is to automatize this paperwork turnover, which actually exists in the military system. Now the question is to implement it, how it should function, so that it allows to digitalize part of the paperwork. It's quite a complicated task, and unfortunately those changes started taking place in this system too late. But on the other hand, the fact that we brought up this issue with the military medical committees, it will entail a lot of changes, because a lot of issues will disappear at this stage of digitalization, because the military units are the management core. They are responsible for that specific serviceman, and they are the final decision makers with regard to a lot of issues relating to this or that serviceman. The fact that a serviceman who wants to go on vacation has to go to the military unit to write a report and to go back, well, in some brigades they make a way around it. They try to send those reports in the protected messengers so that the people can get a copy of it. It's not a verified method, it's not right, but again we see how people try to facilitate, try to find the solution where the government hasn't thought about it. So in this digitalization process, a very important job should be done by the Ministry of Defense and their digitalization teams, because they are the ones who may undertake some actions with regard to the sensitive data and exchange of the sensitive data, because about the servicemen it's a little bit different it's a little bit different story than with the civil people who end up in the hospitals. And your second question was about
З приводу наших
well, as to our warriors from the foreign legion, we will think about it, but we have to understand that as of now the legal framework which regulates their presence here and their access to certain services in Ukraine, it's not yet completed. So before recommending something to them, we have to adopt some legislative changes that would enable them to use such services. For the time being, there is no such legislation, and our colleagues from the Ukrainian Healthcare Center, they were doing that analysis and they were making proposals for the government, because the warriors from the foreign legion, they are not Ukrainian servicemen and they're beyond this legal framework. I know that the legal framework which regulates them, it's not inclusive in terms of services provided to them. Dear friends, do we have any more questions left? Good afternoon, my name is Alexander Belinsky. Thank you for the guide. I think it will be very convenient. We are a civil organization who takes care of the memorial platform. We gather information about the perished ones. We cooperate with all the national media. We make a documentary, and we cooperate with the foreign media too. We make daily updates for the social networks, and we are interested in military statistics. There is a person behind every figure. There is a story. We have 20-30 questionnaires added on a daily basis. We have an extensive database, and many of those people, they apply for help because they have complications in the same way that something that is written in the legislation doesn't coincide with what's happening in practice. So I have a question and a proposal. We want to create a similar platform, a similar guide, so that it helps the families of the military of the perished ones. So we want to either join efforts with you if you're interested in that, or you may offer it to some human rights activists, maybe some lawyers who are interested in doing something like that, because we're not lawyers ourselves, but we have such need. But thank you. We're already working on such track. We're already on that track. So to exchange experience, it would be invaluable, because as soon as we started our civil organization, we were accused of building some political career, and I said that maybe I got the injury for some political reasons. But again, there is no politics behind that. If your expertise and information and the experience you got, if it helps the military, let's become partners. We are ready to become partners with everybody except for very real ugly people. Well, thank you for this conversation. In summary, I would like to say that we are facing a very powerful challenge to create the system that will provide a good normal services for our military. It's the challenge faced by the government and journalists and civil society, so there's a lot of work ahead. I hope we will make it on our way. Thank you. We will continue working together for our victory, and we trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.